people who they consider undesirable after midnight. If you're a hipster or yuppie or whatever, you're not going to get one of these tickets. The likelihood of you getting a beach curfew ticket is very slim. But if you're homeless, you're going to get one.
Now, has anybody attempted to demonstrate the selective enforcement? Because I know that you have been out there with your video camera as far as RVs go, and that was some years ago. You reported on how you were trying to expose the policies of the city that were discriminatory. Have you been doing that also on the beaches, or has anybody been doing that?
Well, yeah, longer, a little bit, just slightly longer than the RVs. Actually, it's sort of the same. It sort of took place around the same time because the overnight permit parking. After I filed multiple complaints with the Coastal Commission, one of which was the beach curfew not having a permit. That law requires a coastal permit. And so after that, it looked like they were going to put these overnight permit parking districts in wink and a nod. But then hopefully my complaints created a situation where they had to get a coastal permit to put in the overnight permit parking, which was all about getting rid of the RVs, the oversized vehicles, at night. But they lost. At the Coastal Commission, they lost. It's an unfortunate situation because now these OPDs, overnight permit parking districts, are all over the city. And
Peggy, that's also the case in Santa Cruz, and I believe it's happening up at well, I don't know if it's I think at Lapis Road in the Marina area, South County.
Are those permit or are those just oversized? Because oversized is another law that...
Yeah, I think these are no parking for anybody, but I think that I haven't determined it, but I'm asking if the Lapis Road people are in the coastal zone. I've sent them the maps, and hopefully they will begin to research that and find out what's going on. It takes a while to get things rolling, particularly when you have to move every day. I was pointing out before you called in that, before you reached me, that the law in Los Angeles that requires you to be off the streets during the day. It's the at night in Los Angeles, or in that is different than is exact opposite is it here down in North Monterey County, where you have to be gone during the day from Lapis Road. And so one of the problems I'm having here is
they can't do that in the coast without a permit.
Well, if we...
The key is substantial. Is it substantial, reducing access, or denying access?
Well, that's the law, as you stated. But with your sympathetic director gone, is that still likely to be the situation that the Coastal Commission will decide it? And we know that last year it did make a positive decision regarding at least not rubber stamping the city of Santa Cruz's attempt to ban RVs at night. But is it also...
Well, I don't know. Like I said, limp. They have been, the Coastal Commission has been so limp. So let me tell you how we got the city of LA to even initiate this permit process, which is happening. The first public hearing is happening this coming, the 4th. It's a Thursday, I'm sorry, the 5th, Thursday night. And it was a lawsuit. It had nothing to do with the Coastal Commission writing letters to the city of LA. A judge said to the city they have to get a coastal permit from a lawsuit. That's the craziest thing. So now they're getting a permit exactly. They're not limiting the hours. They're just and they're still enforcing the law. And they're just getting this permit out of whatever, because this judge told them to. And they don't care. They're still enforcing the law.
So is this a permit that's being done through their local coastal authority or through the broader commission?
Well, it's a weird thing because they have this local... It's the only municipality in the state that has this weird process because they went halfway through getting a local coastal plan, which Santa Cruz does, Santa Cruz County does, but the city of LA does not have a local coastal.
Well, the reason I asked that, I'm going to cut through the details because my problem is I'm really time limited. I also have with me. I have a.
Yeah, they have to. They're doing it internally. It's going to end up in front of the Coastal Commission, and we have to fight it when it gets there because internally it'll be rubber stamped.
Okay, because that in fact is what happened in Santa Cruz. They rubber stamped it, but the Coastal Commission overturned the local coastal situation. I have with me, by the way, in the room, Wes White and Dredd, who are two activists from the Salinas area, who've been recently working with the Lapis Road RV folks. And my audience probably knows more about that than you may, because we've been covering it in some detail. And
I've been following it a little bit.
Good. What I'd like to do is we're going to do a kind of a 2-minute hello thing. Because I've got an interview with Mike Rhodes scheduled in 7 minutes or something like that.
Do you want to go to them and let me go?
Well, I'm going to let you go in 2 or 3 minutes. But what I want to do, if you're going to be around later, I can try and call you to continue this conversation.
Okay.
But although you may have hit some of the main points, which is this hearing coming up, and also, is there much legal muscle? I know you have some ties with Carol Sobel, who's a strong attorney whose work on the Jones case at least overturned somewhat the Skid Row harassment of the homeless at night, although I guess you were using other ordinances after that, 2007.
Oh, okay, so let me tell you that beach curfew is the city of LA has created this park law, and they have deemed that the beach is a park. They define the beach as a park, so it's in the parks law, and we're trying to fight the permit process. Even though we've been trying to get them to do a permit all these years, now we want them to deny the permit. So that is a battle that we are trying to rally right now. And as far as the oversized vehicle ordinance or the parking, it's like a huge disaster in the city of LA. It's a disaster.
And I want to talk about those in more detail, but let me introduce you to Wes White. Hello, Wes.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, Wes.
Right on, nice to meet you. So you're having a hard time down in the LA area, huh?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So,
evil city run by Democrats.
Oh my, well, they're just Republican in sheep's clothing, right? You know, they're two sides of the same shit-dipped coin.
Yeah.
language, Wes, language, for heaven's
Oh,
sake.
don't you love it?
Actually, yes. We're talking with Peggy Lee Kennedy. We got Wes White here, and Dredd snapping photos from a distance. I'm going to call you back, I hope, later on. Though I may try to reach you for the Sunday show, but we'll have more time. This is a 2-hour show. Sunday it goes on, and we can actually.
Anytime. I'm sorry if I didn't answer. I was on the road.
Well, then I'll call you when you aren't, or maybe I'll catch you when you are and you'll answer.
Call me anytime.
All right, thank you, Peggy. And how can people get more information about this? Are there articles online if people want to follow it?
Yeah, well, we have a Facebook page, the Venice Justice Committee, but you can request to become a member. It's a closed page, so we don't want to care.
Sure.
If you join, you can join, but we'll check you out before we put you on. But we're posting everything there, and we just don't accept haters on our Facebook page. So.
Well, I hate those politicians, but I don't hate you.
Venice Justice Committee is a Facebook page.
Venice Justice Committee Facebook, and get in touch with Peggy Lee Kennedy.
Yeah, just it has to be added as a member. As long as you're not a hater, we'll put you on.
All right, well, you got to hate the right kind of things, you know what I mean. Anyway, I will talk to you again.
All right, peace, man.
Take care. So I'm now going to, kind of as I hustle along, going to call Mike Rhodes, who's an activist with the Community Alliance and various other groups in Fresno, where there is a camping ban that has recently been passed that I don't know if it actually mirrors. We'll learn more about the specifics of this ban, presumably when we talk to him, if I can get him on the phone. Hopefully he will answer.
Appointment.
Hey, Robert.
Michael Rhodes, or should I call you Mike?
That is what most people call me.
Well, I'm here in Felton with a couple of Salinas actives. You may remember the video bug. I think his name is Wes White. Say hello, Wes.
Yeah, I know Wes.
Yeah, right on, Mike. How you doing, man? I'm keeping up on you.
And we also have the main man behind all this, Dredd. Hey, Dredd.
Hello, man. How you doing?
And we just talked to Peggy Lee Kennedy in Santa Monica, Venice. Have you ever had much conversation with her?
No, I have not.
Yeah, she's fighting via the Coastal Commission, which is kind of far removed from Fresno, to use the Coastal Commission's requirements to stop the criminalization of people in vehicles and also curfews on beaches that are primarily used against folks outside or homeless folks, or if you will, to be politically correct, people experiencing the homelessness. Now,
How's that going?
she called late, so I didn't get a really clear picture of it. I'm hoping to get a longer discussion on Sunday or maybe later in the show. But it's something like she's fighting a hearing coming up to deny them a coastal permit, first by initially trying to require them to get one, and then moving to show that they shouldn't be getting one because presumably their access is insufficient for the RVs there, if they're talking about RVs or vehicles, or they're in some way also limiting access that affects the entire community, and not just the homeless community, but does affect the homeless community too, and therefore it requires stiffer safeguards. But the reason I called you has to do with some tumultuous activity you're planning for tomorrow.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned permits because the city of Fresno has been pushing us to get a permit for the protest we're having at City Hall tomorrow evening, where we're protesting the no camping ordinance that's just been passed. And they have been pushing for us to get a permit to camp out at City Hall overnight. And my feeling has been that I don't want a permit because I want us to be in the same position that homeless people are in every day. I don't want us to get arrested. I don't want any homeless people to get arrested for sleeping on the streets of Fresno. And so they were pushing this idea to get a permit, and I finally yesterday told them, okay, I'll get a permit, but I want it for 1 year. And so they were, not surprisingly, not interested in modifying the one-day permit to being a year. They said that would create a homeless encampment at City Hall, and they didn't want that.
Heavens.
So now they're kind of back to threatening us with arrest. Mentioning that there's sprinklers that might come on in the middle of the night. That without a permit, we have liability. Without a permit, they're not going to authorize any portable toilets to be put up out there. And on and on. So they're sort of taking a more hostile stance to our protest at this point.
Well, I know that Wes, for 6 months, had an encampment outside City Hall every night, which you supported, by storing people's stuff during the day. Gotta get this.
Right. Yeah.
I'm negotiating with a phone and an audio recorder here. Wes, any advice for Mike? Although, of course, I'm sure Fresno has its own arcane restrictive regulations.
Well, the one big deal on that, I mean, I love your approach on that, but obviously you poke the bear and throw a rock at the hornet's nest. But the year thing, that's fantastic. I love that. And that's actually how we did it. We did it legally within the bounds of the law. They had 6 to 6. It was allowed. Now they're coming back with 7 to 7, where yet you can't be within 300 feet of city structures, including City Hall being the first and foremost. But that's your place of grievance, permit or not. You still got it no matter what. As well as obviously now they're going to fight you too.
Let me ask you about this new ordinance in Salinas, Wes. What does it allow people to camp at night if anywhere in the city on public property, or nowhere on the city, or 300 feet from a building, or what?
I kind of imagine that it's more to legitimize the people in Chinatown to say, okay, fine, we'll leave you alone overnight. But the
And
rest
Chinatown,
of
for those who don't know, is the nearby streets
Yeah.
where folks are camped on the sidewalks.
But don't forget, we came here to talk about Fresno.
We
Salinas.
came to talk about cities across the country, and we have at least 3 of them under the focus. But what is this Fresno camping ban that you are? Is this the specific ordinance that this protest is designed to combat?
Right. It came up pretty quickly. They've had camping ban ordinances proposed before in the city of Fresno, and each time it comes close to a vote, they've pulled it. But this time it came up very quickly. There was a public hearing on it. Lots of people spoke out against it, and then it was passed on a 6-1 vote. And what it does is this. It makes it illegal for anybody to sleep on public or private property with the threat of 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine. So the way they pushed this at the
Before you get into that, Mike, is the word sleep actually the criterion for enforcement?
No, I have to go back and look in the, what it is. I know you're probably familiar with the Sacramento no camping ordinance.
I'm not, but
Okay.
Yeah.
It's modeled after theirs, and I can't recall the language specifically right now, but I know where you're going with that. But the ordinance effectively targets homeless people that are sleeping out at night. It's not targeting cars or people living in garages or anything like that. It's people who are sleeping out wherever. And so what this does is and the way they pushed it was, well, this gives the police one more tool in their toolbox so that they can go and approach a homeless person and encourage them to get the social services that they need. And if they're resistant to that, then they would use the arrest option.
Well, I've heard that as much as I've heard the menace to children, keep them away from schools. There's the needle mailing approach. They got needles everywhere. Then there's the poo-poo and the pee-pee. But, in terms of social services, if you were to talk factually, what kind of social services are available in Fresno? For shelter, for instance.
Right, and how effective is it?
Entirely inadequate, and that's what came up in the public hearings time and again is, yeah, you can say that the intention of this ordinance is people into housing, which is what they claim, but the fact is that it's just not available. There is not adequate housing, so you could not find housing for the thousands of people that are on the street.
Well, I know Mike, I know you've written about this, but do you actually have updated figures on the actual available housing available, let's say, tomorrow night, when the police are going to come and say, there's all kinds of wonderful social services? Do you have are you going to say, wait a minute, these are the figures, or are you going to say, well, we think there is inadequate housing? What are you going to do there?
So there is a report out by the city and the continuum of care here, which identifies the housing options that are available. And yeah, they have numbers there, and it's, we're just so low on the numbers of beds we have or the apartments that are available for people to be moved into. If somebody was to say, okay, yeah, give me housing, don't arrest me, give me housing, what they're going to do is they're going to take them down to this Paparello house where they have a computer in a office where they put everybody's information into their system, and that they're, what they say they want to do is to then get people the resource.
So this is the waiting list gambit, as we call it, right?
Well, it will be, because it's not going to result in housing immediately, because it's just not available. People get put on a list, and they might be on a list for months, years before anything is available. So, but that's their approach to it, is they're going to want to take people to this social service center, which is the Paparello house.
This is the
computer.
This is the doghouse land, as I remember from some years ago talking to you, where they have these sort of wretched sheds that they provide. That's the housing that they'll be waiting for. Are these sheds?
Yeah, they're tool sheds. No heating, no cooling.
Right.
2 people per shed, and there's no toilets in the sheds. And it gets extremely hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. And that is, that would be one option that they would tell people that is available. Of course, those sheds are pretty much maxed out all the time anyway. But even if they were available, there are people who would have good reason not to even want to stay there.
Okay, but it's interesting. I got a call last night that the Santa Cruz homeless, what I call the Homeless Lack of Services Center, which abandoned meals for the homeless 2 years ago, abandoned emergency shelter 2 years ago, and has set up fences and guards around its property. But there were people who would sleep outside on the sidewalk. They have now been essentially told if their property is there during the day, it will be confiscated. That's apparently the word they got last night, according to a report from activist Keith McHenry, who went down there because there's a massive cleanup operation reportedly in the works here in Santa Cruz over the weekend. And so I'm wondering, wasn't there a cleanup operation outside Paparello House recently where they drove people away? And isn't this actually in the face or in the teeth of your, the successful Kincaid lawsuit of 2006-2007 where you wrested $2.3 million and some kind of injunction from the city to stop them from seizing homeless property? And is that still going on? Is that a part of this concern you're doing tomorrow? What's happening with it?
Well, it's unclear how the city is going to proceed on Friday in implementing this new policy. I suspect they're going to be aggressive about it. I've heard reports all over the city that the police are threatening homeless people with arrest if they don't throw their property away and move out. We won't know until it happens what changes are going to take place. But even right now, the way that it is pretty bad, because there's a whole task force in the police department focused on the homeless. They've got, I think, 4 or 5 officers that's their full-time job, is to find homeless people, rouse them out of wherever they are, and if there is property that is not being attended to at that moment, they call in city sanitation, who comes and hauls it away. Surely
you mean that these police officers are concerned with finding them housing and services and encouraging them not to be service resistant. Isn't that in fact what you're really saying, Mike? Aren't you bad-mouthing your good mayor? What's his name anyway?
Lee Brand. Yeah, he was recently elected mayor. Well, look, call it what you will. The city has the resources to pay for police officers to go and break up any encampment that starts to take place, bring out the city sanitation department, and take their property. I've heard recently that there is a change that's taking place, that they're now taking and immediately destroying people's property. Now, that has to be documented like we did in the Kincaid class action lawsuit. We want to get some of the officers on video doing this, and we are just in the early phases of what's going to roll out starting tomorrow. And we do have attorneys we're working with, and we will be asking homeless people who, if they do get arrested or if they do get harassed under this new law, to document that and tell us what's going on. And we have several legal groups that are interested in looking at this and challenging it, not only in Fresno, but in places like Sacramento and any place else where there's a no camping ban.
Well, Mike, you came to Santa Cruz 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And I guess, Wes, you were the videoing his presentation downtown. It was a big hoop-de-doo. And there was conversations I had with you over the years, including well-documented the history you created of the repression of the homeless in Fresno in your book, Dispatches from the War Zone. This issue was supposedly resolved in 2006, 2007, and then attorneys were supposed to be going after it when the injunction, I guess, expired or they were violating it. And now I'm hearing, we're meeting with attorneys, or we're going to try to document. I mean, this sounds like something you were telling me 2 years ago. What has anything happened in those 2 years? And the reason I'm saying this is I get the same story from local activists who also are trying to work with Tristia Bauman of the National Law Center for Homelessness and Poverty, Steve Plaitch's Homeless Legal Assistance Project. It sounds like a lot of talk. I mean, reassure me.
Well, as you know, one has to be always vigilant, and you can't just say, okay, we did it, it's over, done, and everything's okay now. Because, hey, as is evidenced by what's going on here in Fresno, they're going to keep coming up with new and creative ways of harassing homeless people and taking their property, and you have to stay on top of them. If you don't, then they're going to get away with it.
Well, my issue is, are they staying on top of it? And if so, how are they staying on top of it? I mean, you and your daughter went out with a video camera, found attorneys, and got $2.3 million out of the city. And that took all of 2 or 3 years. We're now 10 years later, and of course homelessness has gotten worse. They've destroyed the encampments under the bridges there, although in Oakland, you may be aware, you probably are, they're actually trying to, at least to some extent, provide sanitation services for the encampments under the freeways that are, multiplying like mushrooms. I say this from my own personal observation of the last couple of weeks when I was up there. And Wes, you were up there at one time looking at one of the encampments, which I think was since was driven away. But then they just keep coming back and they're growing. Are there encampments still in Fresno that are growing under the freeways and elsewhere? And are these folks going to come down and be supportive tomorrow, do you think? Or are they, in fact, shall we say, nervous about confronting the police, or both?
I think everybody's a little nervous about what's going to happen tomorrow. There certainly is the threat of arrest because we don't have a permit. So anybody who comes realizes that they're risking arrest. I don't think that the city is going to arrest people at City Hall for this protest, but I think you have been arrested at your City Hall in Santa Cruz for sleeping out. So that's always a possibility.
Yeah, but
what was the other part of your question?
Well, I'm wondering what the status of the actual encampments is in Fresno, and also I know you personally and others who are working with, the Kincaid lawsuit originally, and then the follow-up, provided porta potties and trash pickups. You tried to get the city to do the same. I'm not sure how successfully. What's happening with that in terms of the actual survival encampments that are there?
Right. Yeah. No. They've really been effective at busting encampments up, and it's just a matter of their constantly being on people whenever people come together and start building anything. they come and destroy it. So we now don't have any encampments in Fresno. What's happened is that people have gotten pretty good at staying out of sight. So there's a lot of vacant houses in Fresno. People are living, they go into those houses that are vacant or abandoned. They live in places that are very out of the way. There's some, even in the city of Fresno, there's some vacant lots that have bushes, and there's canal banks, and there's lots of places where you can go and be out of the way. And so that's what's happened is people have gotten pretty good at finding places where they're not going to be harassed by the police. Now, you asked too about people coming down to the demonstration tomorrow. Yeah, I think we'll have a pretty good showing of homeless people that are going to come out and join in this protest. And what I've heard from a number of people is that, hey, we really don't have anything to lose at this point, because even if we get arrested at City Hall tomorrow night, that's no different than the position we would be at no matter where we are. So this kind of a threat puts people in a position of having really nothing to lose.
So they would be looking at a misdemeanor trespass or camping, unlawful camping. What would they hit you with?
Violating a permit, perhaps?
I think what they would charge people with is this new camping ordinance, which says that you can't camp on public or private property, and that it's a misdemeanor, and you could get up to 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. Will that happen? Will anybody get arrested, put in jail, and serve 6 months for this? We don't know.
Well, there's going to be a mandatory minimum, administrative fees and minimum court costs. Ours is $220, and the real big ringer on this is the 3-year probation, promising that you will not commit a same or a similar offense in the next 3 years. Then you're automatically set up for that pipeline of prison issue.
What's the status, Mike, of the Fresno police? I've heard some rather frightening stories in the course of the last decade of talking with you on the phone. Even the possibility of police orchestrated murder of homeless people. Are police, for example, going after people who are squatting, as they say, in these abandoned buildings? A new strategy you suggest that's being used? Are you getting reports on how police are treating homeless people in custody? What's the story with that?
It varies. I think you remember Al Williams. He's been homeless in Fresno for many years, and in the area that he's at right now is in the Pinedale area, which is kind of up north in a more affluent area. He says that there are some officers that are just like threatening him every day, looking forward to arresting him and taking him in when this new camping ordinance goes into effect. And there are other ones who are like, they'll buy him a hamburger and talk to him. So there's probably, like in any other profession, there's a range.
Yeah, that's not really my question, Mike. My question is whether once you're in custody, what's the general experience of people there? I mean, in other words, you're saying, well, what difference does it make if you get arrested or not, because you're going to get hassled on the street? But it might make a considerable difference. I've never been arrested in Fresno. I was arrested in Sacramento, and it was no fun at all, even though I was with a whole bunch of middle-class people. The issue was homelessness, and it was 20 years ago. And things may have changed a lot. But do you have any reports? Because I know you work on a newspaper called the Community Alliance, which concerns itself with broader issues than simply homelessness and homeless civil rights.
Sure. Well, I've been arrested several times here for doing civil disobedience, and usually the process is that they take you in, they give you a citation, they process you, and release you. And oftentimes there's some kind of, if you don't do anything, get arrested again.
Yeah,
for a
but
year.
you're white upper middle class with lots of political connections. I'm talking about a poor person on the street, maybe a person of color, who doesn't have any of that. What kind of accounts have you gotten from them?
Well, people who are homeless that get arrested, they're oftentimes, it's just a matter of them getting taken down to jail, held for 3 or 4 days, and then released. It's not a pleasant experience, but I haven't had any reports that people are being brutalized once they're in the Fresno County Jail.
Well, that's kind of reassuring, I guess. Wes, do you have any questions you have for Mike that you might, or advice given your own experience with 6 months of, legalized encampment, and then you did some fighting to stop the Chinatown deportations in March or April of last year, and get into it.
Well, the one thing I would say is if anybody does get arrested, plead not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Take that thing all the way to trial. Make it a big public opinion case. You can get a lot of the moral support that way, and I think there's really no legal basis other than, well, we changed the rule and so therefore it's legal. It doesn't really change the constitutionality, of our situation, which is the whole reason why we keep doing this. And that's going to shine through a lot easier. And as long as people keep on taking stuff to trial, they're going to quit and they're going to say, all right, fine, this ordinance ain't working because we're working too hard trying to push people into punishment.
That was our theory 27 years ago, and we actually, I think, did some pushback here in Santa Cruz on that. But another question I have for you, and I'll let you respond, of course, to Wes's remark, but is this a one-night stand, so to speak? Are you going to go down there, do a nice little protest, and then everybody's going to go home? Or is it going to be a continuous thing? I know that I'm not one to talk. I'm not going to Fresno for this protest. I'm not even going down to Santa Cruz for the protest. They're probably doing a lot of protesting over the weekend. Or I might be, I don't know. We'll see. But what Keith McHenry, who does these protests, has often said, and I think it's true, is you got to keep coming back again and again in a way that puts the screws to this kind of repression, and ultimately encourages people to stand up. But that's hard for people to do, and it's hard for people to organize. What are your plans on that, if any?
Right. Well, I think this is a good place to start. That we get people together for one night where people are standing in solidarity with homeless people. There's a suggestion, I don't know if you remember in the 80s how people would go to El Salvador and Guatemala and accompany human rights activists that were active during the civil wars there. But it was a strategy to be with people, all the time so that they weren't attacked and killed. And that idea has come up here that, this is nice that we're doing this for one day, but really whether we have a permit or not, it's not going to help people who are out on the streets the next day or week or month after that. And that there's some interest in people staying with the homeless to be witness to what happens and to try to prevent the city from, or the police from, arresting homeless people for the crime of sleeping in Fresno for the night. I don't know where that'll go, Robert. One never knows what's going to come from actions that you do, but I think you start a spark and you hope that that continues and it ignites people's imagination and they go from there and take up other actions that are effective.
And you will be videoing this, of course, maybe hiring Wes. I understand his rate is $1,000 an hour now. He's a very...
That's cheap.
He's going to give you the discount rate. There'll be video that you'll be posting online of the outcome of this protest so that we can all sit at home and congratulate ourselves on what a wonderful protest it was and how we're very sympathetic from 100 miles away.
Great. I know there will be people there with cameras and video it live. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from us about how this all went.
Good.
Is there much, just finally, I know you want to get out of here and you got a busy day. Are you have any time right now or not? What's your schedule look like?
Oh, I've got all kinds of things, swirling around. I'm trying to get portable toilets over there, and I could see the companies trying to call me, and I got the police calling me as I'm talking to you, so I'm kind of in a whirlwind, but I'm certainly good for one more question.
Boy, I think I had it, but I may have lost it. You have a question?
And I'd like to throw one other thing out, is that I think the next thing that's going to happen here, if we don't, put a stop to all this, is they're going to go after people who are providing homeless people with food and meals. We had one of our groups get confronted by, some government agency that came out and told her to stop providing homeless people with food because she doesn't have a kitchen facility that is been approved for that kind of food services. She doesn't transport it in the proper truck or van, and on and on and on. So I think that we think, yeah, this is terrible what's just happened with this camping ban, but I think that there are more things that are coming down the pipeline, and we have to be prepared for and confront as they come up.
Yeah. Food Now Bombs, I take it, isn't terribly active in Fresno.
Well, they're fairly active. There's 2 different Food Not Bombs groups.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Serve food at least 2 days a week.
Well, the next time I talk to you, maybe it'll be after this whole thing is over, so you'll have a breathing room, or maybe you'll be staying out there with homeless people, and I'll be able to catch you in the midst of it. See if you can give me an update on what's going on legally. I mean, it sounds like I got a pretty vague response from you on that, and I'm interested in knowing the specifics. When's the next court hearing? What's being done to try to implement the so-called, or to reinstitute the injunction, if there is. Has it been abandoned? Are the same legal people coming together to help, or are they not? And if you have any answer to that question now you want to put out, you can, but I know you're, get those toilets out, old man. What can I say?
Well, I'm kind of of 2 minds about the toilets. One is I think it would be nice to have them there, and I'll get them if I can. I mean,
for your house folks, they need it. I said for your...
I've been talking to has been saying, well, since you didn't get a permit, we're not going to authorize you to put any portable toilets on City Hall property. You've chosen to engage in illegal activity at City Hall, and we're not going to authorize you to put them there. And my response to that is, we're just going to put them there anyway if we can, and see what you do.
Right.
Okay. Sounds like a lot of shit to me.
What's swirling around right now is whether we could even get them in it. But even if we don't, I mean, the other part of me says, hey, this is how homeless people in Fresno live every day. They don't have toilets. So,
well, tell people to bring their bottles, their Gatorade bottles.
Yeah.
And we may laugh about that, but that's what I saw happening last night, or the night before last. No, I guess it was Sunday. I saw a very kind of aggressive, angry homeless guy in an embarrassed way, kind of pull off to the side and very carefully try to take a piss into a bottle along the encampment that was along our post office wall that was, is still there and was due to be removed on October 1st.
Nice. Well, it's a good thing at least he was containing it.
Well, but the point was, both he was, but to me, what moved me was he was concerned about keeping a clean area. And this is a guy who's half the time drunk and who's gotten into fights. He's not your, ideal, model Brent Adams Sanctuary Village homeless kind of guy, or the kind of person that the Homeless Lack of Services Center would give services to. But he's respecting the rights of the people around him. And that to me is, moves me. Because I feel more reassured as a homeless person that I won't get attacked. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Mike, any concluding words before we release you from bondage?
Well, let's be in touch and talk about how this thing went. I'll give you a report back in a week or so.
Yeah, I may try and do a three-way because I do have that phone capability. We'll put Wes in on this again, and maybe we can get the observing and noting Dread to get his own thoughts on this too. He's taken pictures and he's a witness to the whole thing. Anyway, thank you, and Mike. And how can people get more information if they want on this? What's been happening? If they want to follow up on this?
Well, follow you because you're going to be doing report backs. If they want to get in touch with me, I'll give my phone number. It's area code 559-978-4502.
One more time.
978-4502. Area code 559.
And are you going to be posting something on Indie Bay or some other website, the Community Alliance website, or?
Yeah, somebody asked me that yesterday, and I said I haven't thought about it because I'm just so involved in what I'm doing that documenting it and getting it out there is secondary. So I'm sure we will, but it's not on my mind right now.
Well, thanks, Mike. We've been talking with Mike Rhodes, the Fresno man, and good luck tomorrow.
Thanks, Robert. Talk to you soon.
All right.